be respectful and quiet, and sometimes you'll hear if someone is emotional, maybe from the family or whatever, that might be about the only noise you ever get. And sometimes, there are exceptions to that, but that's the general case, right? In their culture, it was the exact opposite. I mean, they made all kinds of wailing and mourning, and that's supposed to be, it's a sign of your grief. It's maybe they figure it's cathartic, getting it out. I don't know, but that was kind of how it was in their culture. And the mourning, M-O-U-R-E-N-I-N-G, coincided typically with the tragedy. Greater tragedy, greater mourning. So you can imagine this scene. A 12-year-old little girl has died. The ruler of the synagogue's daughter, his only daughter. You reckon there was some wailing and weeping and mourning going on? So there's all kinds of chaos going on. The Jews would also often, but sometimes, it might even be fair to say often, they would hire mourners sometimes, especially if it was somebody in a position of prominence or something. Now, you had other times, the story was told of Herod the Great. He was kind of the first of that line of Herods that were kings and all, and Herod the Great was a rascal. I mean, he was just, Brother Brinkley would say, rotten to the core, and the core is too. He was just something else. But he was so cruel and avaricious that he made sure in advance of his death, long in advance, because he obviously didn't know when he was going to die, he hired mourners and arranged for mourners to be hired so that someone would grieve for him when he died, with the assumption that otherwise nobody would grieve. And he knew that. He was just a rascal. I think it was Herod the Great. I think I've got that right. It was one of those fellows, but I think it was Herod the Great. Anyway, so all kinds of chaos when Jesus gets there. You can only imagine this being a ruler of the synagogue, his daughter, his only daughter. There's going to be a lot of carrying on. And I was looking for, is it verse 23? Yeah, the King James has minstrels, and I want to check the New King James. I think it says flute players. Yes, flute players. It's the idea, these are the hired mourners. They're there, they're going to make music, and they're going to play something mournful to go with all this chaos that's going on to mourn this death. And they laughed at Jesus. And sometimes people look at this and they say, I mean, really? They laugh at a funeral? We talk about the kind of person who would laugh at a funeral. Well, there are two possibilities here. They may be laughing scornfully. Even in a funeral situation, somebody comes in and says, if somebody were to walk up at a funeral today and say, oh, he's not dead, he's just asleep, you might say, there's something seriously wrong with this person. If he really thinks that, you're not laughing, ha, this is so funny. It's a scornful type, scoffing type of laugh. I think that might be the most likely. The other option would be, keep in mind, the flute players especially, they're hired people. They may not have even known this girl. They may not care a thing about her or her daddy or her family. And so they may honestly be just laughing like, bless his heart, this dummy thinks she's asleep. He doesn't even know that. How could you not know that she's dead? I don't know. Either way, there's not a problem there. Sometimes people read that and they say, that just seems a little hard to swallow. But it certainly makes sense. Yes, sir.
Can you imagine how quiet it got when he took her by the hand and she rose from the dead?
Boy, isn't that the truth? Can you imagine? Robert made the point, all this chaos going on. Now they're kind of scoffingly laughing, or whether they're scoffingly laughing or genuinely laughing. But can you imagine how quiet everybody was after he raised this young lady from the dead? But first, he's going to put the people out. So they're not going to be in that particular room when he does this. And so verse 25 says, when the people were put forth. Luke gives us a little more information here, Luke 8:51, and Luke tells us that he permitted only 3 people in there with him. Who were they? Do what? Somebody said over here? Not the father and mother. Well, I guess it would include them as well. But who else? Peter, John, Mount of Transfiguration, same three people. Peter, James, and John. You see the same thing at the Mount of Transfiguration. You see it in the Garden of Gethsemane. He's going to take the disciples, and then he's going to go a little further, but he only takes Peter, James, and John in that instance as well. So the disciples, or the apostles, were, kind of his inner circle, but it would seem even had closer friends. Maybe we would say best friends, or the young folks like to say BFFs. I don't know, but it seems they were closer, and there may have been other reasons. We can't say that with 100% certainty, but it's just like anybody. You have friends, and you have friends that are closer and friends that are closest. But Luke does tell us that he permitted only Peter, James, and John. I'm curious to know now, Martin, now that you've mentioned that, let's look at Luke 8. It does say the father and the mother as well? Or are you in Matthew's account? Luke? Yeah, it does. I missed that. I was so focused on Peter, James, and John from Luke 8:51 that I didn't catch that the father and mother went in there as well. And then, of course, in Matthew it doesn't specify, but Luke gives us a little more detail. Thank you for that. I need to make a note in my notes. Where is it? And maybe I was just assuming the parents there, but I don't think I caught that. Thank you. So again, John 11, I mentioned that was sleep, with the metaphor for sleep, the metaphor for death being sleep. Mark and Luke also record that he took her by the hand and spoke to her also. Mark 5:41, Luke 8:54. But again, you have a miracle here with immediate results. It reminds us of Jesus' command when he tells them, what is it he says? I was looking for the exact wording. It's in a different account. He tells them not to go out and tell everybody. And again, we've talked about that before. Sometimes he tells people, don't tell anybody. Sometimes he tells people, go and tell others. And then sometimes he just doesn't say one or the other. And different reasons for that, and I won't rehash all of that. But here's the thing. Raising somebody from the dead, is that a big deal? You think? And so as you can imagine, as expected, it spread like wildfire. I mean, this man, this ruler of the synagogue, his daughter was dead. He raised her from the dead. We know she was dead. We saw her. We were there. So you can imagine, it did. It spread quickly. The fame hereof, it says, went abroad into all that land. And so other examples of Jesus raising someone from the dead. The widow of Nain's son, Luke chapter 7. Here in Matthew 9, Mark 5, Luke 8, Jairus' daughter. Lazarus, of course, John 11. And it's interesting, in Jesus' message to John, when we get to Matthew chapter 11, remember John is going to send disciples to Jesus. Are you the Messiah, or should we look for another? And he says, go tell him the blind see, the deaf hear, the lame are healed. But included in that was what? The dead are raised. That's plural. So that's interesting. We don't know everybody. We're not told every single person that he raised from the dead. But dead or raised there, it's plural. So very interesting. By the way, Caleb asked a question. Is there a reason for putting everyone out? I don't know. I don't know that I could say a specific reason, but maybe because it's a private moment. He just says the parents, and then he brings Peter, James, and John with him. I don't know. I don't know that I could say. There's nothing that we're told that would indicate that. And yeah, it was probably crowded, and that certainly. And yeah, some of them were laughing him to scorn, kind of, being scoffing. So maybe that's kind of what he says, you know what, get them out of here. I'm going to do my thing, but get them all out of here. I don't know. I can't say 100% for certain, but it's an interesting question. But sometimes you just have to say, I don't know. And I don't think anybody can know the answer to that, at least with certainty. So you go on, and Jesus is going to heal 2 blind men here, beginning in verse 27, and this goes through 31. When he leaves there, departed thence, 2 blind men followed him, crying and saying, Thou son of David, have mercy on us. When he was coming to the house, so apparently he goes into some house. Maybe it's their house. It doesn't say. It just says the house. The blind man came to him, and Jesus says to them, "Believe you that I am able to do this?" They said unto him, "Yea, Lord." He touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith be it unto you." And their eyes were opened. And Jesus straitly charged them, saying, "See that no man know it." So here's another example. Jesus says, don't tell anybody. But they, when they were departed, spread abroad his fame in all that country. So he tells them, don't go and tell anybody, but they didn't listen. Sometimes people did. More often than not, they did not listen. This miracle and do what? And I was going to say that, understand that if we're in the same position, if you're blind and somebody touches your eye and all of a sudden you see, do you reckon it'd be hard to not tell anybody? That'd be a challenge. So, yeah, and you're a parent. Your child dies. I mean, you're devastated. You're grieving, and then he raises her from the dead. You reckon that'd be hard to keep quiet? I suspect so. Yes, sir.
In Matthew's account, the parents are not told not to go and tell anyone, but in Luke's account, they are.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect that one of the reasons why Jesus would tell people, don't tell anybody, I'm not doing this for attention. Now then, what those people chose to do, that was their business. But no one could accuse Jesus of trying to be some standout. No, he's doing the Father's will. He's not doing his will. He's doing the Father's will. We can never lose sight of that.
Yes.
Because if we're not careful, we think, well, now, why will he heal this person and not this one?
Right.
Because he is simply doing the Father's will, but even above that, confirming the Word.
Yep.
If we miss that, this is not about miracles. That's why miracles today are in a classification of no longer necessary.
Right.
Because the Word's been confirmed. We miss that. This is not about healing people, because if Jesus came to heal people, he failed miserably. There were sick people before, during, and after.
Yep. And I think that's an important point. And I think that's one of the primary reasons when Jesus does tell people don't tell. We gave a number of reasons. I think it was 2 or 3 classes back. But I think that's one of the primary reasons. Nobody could ever say, oh, he's showing out, because he's often telling them, now don't go and tell people. Don't go publishing this abroad. And it's not because he's scared for somebody to know or something. I think he's trying to make the point that he didn't come to be a show-off. He didn't come to say, everybody step right up and see the great healing Messiah. It's not about that. It's all about doing the Father's will, confirming that the message is authentic, that the message is divine. And, with the Father's will, and tied up in that is the same today. We don't always know why something happens or doesn't happen. But not everybody was healed, as you pointed out, Tim. And we've talked before about Acts chapter 12. Herod takes James, the brother of John. What happens? He's executed. And Peter's in prison, and he doesn't plan to give Peter a warning. He doesn't plan to have a chat with him or put him on probation. He's going to execute him too. He's going to bring him out after Passover, and they're going to have another execution. The church is praying for Peter. An angel comes and releases Peter. Do you reckon the church was not praying for James? I find that hard to believe. I suspect, I think I could say with some serious confidence they were. And yet James gets executed. Peter gets released. Was Peter a better Christian? No, nothing in Scripture that could allow you in any way, shape, form, or fashion to take that position scripturally. Or that James was worse a Christian somehow or another. Both faithful servants of God. One dies, one lives. Why? I can't answer that. You can't answer that. There is one being who can answer that, and it's God. And maybe we'll find out when we get to heaven. Maybe not, I don't know. But very, very good point there. So the miracle here in verses 27 through 31 where Jesus heals these two blind men, this miracle and the one following are both only recorded by Matthew. So these men must have received strong testimony from somebody, right? Because, I mean, how many miracles had they seen? Not a one. They were blind. So sometimes people say, well, if only people, and sometimes people even say this trying to take the position that miracles are still happening. But don't you understand, if people could see a miracle, they would really believe. So you don't think people can believe without seeing a miracle? And the rich man said that same thing, the rich man Lazarus there in Luke 16. And in fact, what was he told when he said that? Man, if you could just send Abraham back to my brothers, if somebody rose from the dead, they'd believe. And what was Father Abraham's response? They got Moses and the prophet. They got the Bible, God's word. And if they don't listen to that, they wouldn't listen even if one rose from the dead. Hey, there were a whole bunch of people in Palestine that one rose from the dead. The one rose from the dead. And some of them still didn't believe. Oh, his disciples took the body. Oh, thieves came. He wasn't really dead. All these pathetic excuses that don't even begin for a moment to explain the empty tomb. So don't tell me, if somebody rises from the dead, that'll make all the infidels become believers. No. They have the Word of God. So these men, they'd never even seen a miracle with their eyes. They'd received strong testimony from somebody, but it shows us that you don't have to see a miracle with your own eyes. You don't necessarily have to see them physically in order to believe. Just like with the leper in 8:4, just like with the parents of this daughter of Jairus, Jesus tells these men to say nothing. But, like the others, they went out and basically told everybody. Again, this is not maliciously, but it's out of excitement. It's like, I can't keep it quiet, can't keep it to myself. And, I think there is even something in that for us to learn. How excited are we about the good news? How excited are we about what Jesus has done for us and God has done for us in our lives? Sometimes people keep it quiet. Way, way, way too quiet. These people, they just couldn't keep it quiet. They had to tell people how great things God had done for them. Can you keep it quiet? Or are you compelled to go and tell others about it? Then as they go out, they bring a man. This is the healing of a dumb man, and we don't mean in reference to intelligence, but a mute man, a man who was not able to speak. So as they go out, they bring to him this dumb man or this mute man who's possessed with a demon. This is not a devil. I'm not going to go into my spiel again about that's one of my frustrations with the King James. This is a demon. There is one devil, Satan. This is not Satan that's possessing him. It's a demon. When the demon was cast out, and again, without getting into a big whole thing, I think the best evidence is that these demons would have been departed spirits of wicked men. That this was allowed for a time in order to show the Messiah's control over even the spirit realm. In fact, it says, what is it in Colossians? He's in heaven, and what's subject unto him? Angels, principalities, powers. In other words, all, in fact, he says in Matthew 28:18, Jesus came and spake unto them, all power, and that's exousia in the Greek, authority, has been given unto me in heaven and on earth. So he has all authority. So it seems that this was some kind of a temporary thing that was allowed in order to show the Messiah's power over even the spirit realm. But it's not the devil, demons. But when the demon was cast out, the dumb spake, and the multitudes marveled, saying, it was never so seen in Israel. But the Pharisees said, he casteth out demons through the prince of the demons. By the way, all 5 miracles in this chapter, this is the 5th, all 5 miracles are based on faith, but not ever once faith only. It's always faith demonstrated in action. You know what James says. You say you have faith. I have my works. You show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. Wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? But you look at the paralytic who was healed earlier in the chapter. There's faith in action there, isn't there? They brought their friend to Jesus. In fact, they went to a great deal of trouble, right? Breaking up the roof and all that. The faith of the synagogue leader, Jairus, he came to Jesus for help. He journeyed to Jesus. The faith of the woman who has the issue of blood or this hemorrhaging, she came to Jesus and she touched the hem of his garment. And now you're going to see with this mute man, here are his friends. They're going to bring him to Jesus to be healed. It's also interesting, demons had different effects on people, didn't they? When you study this in Scripture, some people would kind of lose their mind. They're not in their right mind. You see that in Mark chapter 5 with that man there. Some were out of control and convulsing. You see in Mark chapter 9 rather, throwing him into the fire and things like that. And it seems here in Matthew 9 that this demon simply made the man mute. Different effects on different people. Again, we don't have a whole lot of detail beyond that. So to get more information, I guess that's another one we're going to have to just ask God when we get there. Live right, go to heaven, and ask Him when we get there. Yeah, and we'll have plenty of time to have all those questions answered once we're in heaven. J.W. McGarvey made this statement. I thought this was pretty interesting. He says, the range of fresh miracles, however, necessarily had a limit. And therefore, miracle working as a means of impressing men had to be of temporary duration. That's in his commentary on Matthew and Mark on page 86. That's pretty interesting. And it's a good point. You know, at some point, people are going to say, that's old hat. I mean, he's been doing that. He's still on that trick, trying to get people. And so that's part of the temporary nature of the miraculous. The range of fresh miracles, it's going to eventually run out. So I thought that was a pretty interesting statement. Again, here are people witnessing undeniable miracles. Your natural inclination would be to believe, right? You would think. Well, the unbelieving Pharisees, no doubt, have people who are asking them, hold on, you say he's a fraud, you say he's a charlatan, a bad person, and yet, I mean, he's opening eyes. This guy's got a demon, he can't speak, and he cast out the demon. This lady was hemorrhaging, and he stops. I mean, she just touched his garment. He raised that little girl from the dead. How could he not be the Messiah? So maybe they're getting a little squirrely at this point, thinking, we got to do something, we got to say something. And so they do the unthinkable. And they attribute this immediate, undeniable miracle, casting out a demon, to the prince of the demons, which of course would be Satan himself. It's unbelievable. They attribute this verifiable, undeniable proof of Jesus' deity. They attribute it to the devil himself. It's unbelievable. How could you do that? Of course, later on, Jesus is going to go into this a little bit more in Matthew 12, 25 through 32. But based on that, this is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit. And later on, he's going to point out the stupidity of that. I mean, I know that's a blunt word, but that's just the only way to put it. It's almost like Jesus is saying, come on, how dumb can you be? If I'm casting out demons by the prince of demons, how's that going to work? If I'm doing his work, Satan's work, I wouldn't be casting out this demon in the first place. I'd be encouraging it, egging it on. Yeah, it's crazy. But that's what they did. Note here that Matthew is continually expanding upon the statement of Matthew 8:17 to show Jesus as the fulfillment of the prophesied Messiah. Over and over, Matthew shows Jesus taking away their infirmities. Remember that was prophesied in Isaiah 53? Healed our infirmities, bore our burdens. Over and over, the people see Jesus and they believe that he can help them. And then they do something. They come to him or they bring their friend to him, but they somehow act upon that belief. Jesus is healing infirmities. People believe he can do that, and they act on it. And so what Matthew is trying here to do is to get the Jews. Remember, Matthew is written primarily with the Jews in mind to show this is your Messiah. He's trying to get the Jews to believe in Jesus and then to act upon it. It's like he's saying, look, here are people, undeniable miracles. They believed. They acted upon it. What about you? Are you going to believe? Is he going to lead you to act upon it, to obey him, to follow him? If Jesus could heal their physical diseases, if Jesus could raise people from the dead, then he most certainly could heal their spiritual illness, right? It just naturally follows. And that's the purpose of those miracles. It proves he is the Messiah. And then 35 through 38, this is the passage. We could sum it up with the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers few. Notice in verse 35, he goes about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, healing every sickness and every disease among the people. Doesn't mean every single one, because we know there were times when some people were not. But notice here that Jesus didn't just stay in one place and invite people to come. He would go to the people. Josephus says in his writing, Josephus was a Jewish historian, uninspired but very valuable historically. Josephus says there were some 240 towns and or villages in Galilee at that time. So if he went to all of them, every single one, this would have taken some time. And then when you get to 36, it's a familiar passage. When he saw all the multitudes, he's moved with compassion on them because they fainted. Were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Compassion is an attribute of the Messiah, right? Isaiah 53. And God desires compassion, right? Matthew 9:14, we already saw that right here in this chapter. I think it was last class. Jesus' miracles were primarily to prove him as the Messiah, the Son of God, but they also show his compassion. This is an attribute of God, and it's also something that God desires from us. And then when you finish out the chapter here, then saith he unto his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he will send forth laborers into his harvest. Here Jesus turns from the multitude and he begins to address his disciples. There are masses of people coming to Jesus. They're suffering physically, but spiritually also they're like sheep without a shepherd. They lack good leadership. Certainly from pagan Rome, right? Obviously they're lacking leadership there. But also they're generally hypocritical leaders spiritually. I mean, who are the leaders? The Pharisees, sometimes the Sadducees. Are they lacking? You better believe it. They're scattered abroad like sheep without a shepherd. So this situation, it gets to Jesus. We've talked about this word before that's translated compassion. There in verse 36, move with compassion. Splunk nidzamai in the Greek. It's a funny sounding word, but it's a funny feeling that you get. It's that not in the gut type of feeling. That's one of the best ways I could think of to describe it. When you see something, maybe you've ever passed by and there's something tragic that has happened and you just feel like, I got to do something to help. I saw a story on the news the other day, or maybe a news site, where a car had crashed and a child had fallen over the bridge into some water. And this man, he didn't realize the water was only just a few feet deep, but he happened upon the accident. He jumped in the water, and thankfully he was okay. But he just, he rolled up and he realized there's a child in danger. Somebody's got to do something. And there was nobody else there, so he took action. And that's splunk nizamai. It's a knot in the gut. You got to do something. You just can't be at peace or at rest until you do whatever is in your power to help out, whatever that may be. Well, it got to Jesus. Does it get to us? We see people scattered abroad like sheep without a shepherd. He came to be the good shepherd. There's a great work to do and a harvest to be had, but we need more workers. More workers is a worthy and needed thing to pray for, right? Pray therefore the Lord of the harvest, he'll send forth reapers into the harvest, John 4:35. But equally so, more workers is a worthy and needed thing to be in the kingdom, right? We don't need to just pray for them, we need to be workers. Pray for open doors, but enter open doors as well when we have them. God's chosen method to save is what? Preaching. But how shall they hear without a preacher? Romans 10:14. It's a shame some of the cults and denominations in the world are more evangelistic than God's people. Papa tells me that when he was in Taiwan, they had six gospel evangelists. The Mormons had 400. Now that's a shame. And so Jesus says, pray for more workers. God give us more like Isaiah, who says, "Here am I, Lord, send me." Notice here that it's the Lord's harvest, not ours. God gives the increase. It's His harvest. It's not mine. It's not yours. May we never, ever, ever forget that. Thank you very much. We'll pick up, Lord willing, next week with Matthew chapter 10.